Hello everybody and welcome to another top 10 board gaming video. Today's topic is all about games that are based off of literature. So this means literary characters, literary stories, all sorts of different stuff like that. I am really excited about this because there is a lot of material ripe for the picking when it comes to some very intriguing character interactions, very intriguing mechanics, political intrigue, all sorts of other different types of stuff. Literature is an amazing resource when it comes to some great game design and aspects and all sorts of other stuff like that. I'm really excited to jump right into it, but of course, as always, please let me know what you guys think of this. What are your favorite literature themed games or literature based games? Let me know anything and everything in the comments, but with that, we're going to jump right in with my number 10. At number 10, I have the generalized category of Warhammer. This started off as a basic skirmish war game that has grown into a massive empire of novels, graphic novels, comic books, all sorts of different stuff, not to mention dozens of tabletop games as well as spin-off board games, RPGs, and video games, all sorts of different stuff. The reason it's so low on the list though is because the original game actually came out before the literature started to be published. But then what happened was the literature was based off of the games, and then more games became based off of new literature, and they just sort of kept feeding off of each other from there, and it's still happening to this day. It's absolutely incredible. I personally have not really played any of them. It's very intimidating for me, but it certainly deserves a place on this list. Warhammer as a collective, my number 10. At number 9, I've got Lords of Waterdeep, which takes place in the city of the same name within the Dungeons & Dragons world of the Forgotten Realms. Effectively, the city was designed to be sort of a character in and of itself, with lots of political intrigue, a bunch of nobles that are trying to clamber to the top, lots of intriguing things that are happening one way or the other, and all sorts of other different stuff. Effectively, the board game was only published relatively recently, but the city has existed within the D&D tabletop game for many years. The game itself is wonderfully well designed. It's absolutely amazing, particularly with the Skullport expansion alongside. But that said, it's lower on the list because in general, the Dungeons & Dragons literature is not necessarily viewed as literature to the rest of the world. And on top of that, it was originally published as part of the campaign setting within the Forgotten Realms, not exactly as a literature section. But regardless, it's still a wonderful game and it's a great storyline. Lords of Waterdeep, my number 9. At number 8, I've got Robinson Crusoe, based off of the classic novel of the same name about castaways that end up stranded on an island. Effectively, within the game as well as within the book, people are trying to survive. They are trying to get back to where they came from. In the game, it acts as a cooperative game where you've got several scenarios that you're trying to get through, building camps, hunting things, all of that kind of stuff. It's lower on the list though because I have this edition, which is a very difficult edition to get through. The newer edition is a lot easier in terms of the rules and things like that, but overall it's a solid game. It's a lot of fun and it really is true to the original literature, so overall it's wonderful. Robinson Crusoe, my number 8. At number 7, I've got Dune. I was truly torn about this one because I adore this board game. It's absolutely incredible and was just reprinted ahead of the new movie coming out. But that said, the actual novel for this is brutal. The original Dune series consisted of, I think it was 5 novels or something like that, and there is an insane amount going on within them. It is really difficult to keep track of, and I'm actually reading them right now, so my head is basically exploding with all of the information. And the problem is that you can't take everything that is going on within these novels and cram it into a game. That said, the game itself is truly wonderful. It is a pleasure to play, and what they did manage to get in there from the novels is wonderfully well done and really speaks well to the characters from the original book. With all of that, Dune is my number 7. At number 6, I've got Hogwarts Battle, named for the modern classic Harry Potter series, where essentially the idea is that every person is playing as an individual character with a specific deck, and you're trying to fend off the particular bad guy. I really like how this game translates the ideas from the books onto the board, where you have the cooperative aspect combating a specific foe, because in most of the books you have sort of like the mini bosses, so to speak, and then of course the overall overarching boss of Voldemort happening constantly. In this game, you sort of see that same kind of ramp up where you've got individual packets that associate with specific people and specific scenarios, and they get harder and harder as they go. I think it's really cool that they did that. I love the way that it's designed. It's a ton of fun, and on top of that, the expansion is good too. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, my number 6. At number 5, I've got War of the Ring. This game was probably the toughest one for me to pick because there are a ridiculous number of Lord of the Rings board games out there. From my perspective though, War of the Ring is the one that best encapsulates the idea of these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, and that is the main conflict that we are looking at within a lot of the literature here. Now obviously there is internal conflict, internal strength within the Fellowship as well as within the individual characters, and that is not something that we should remove from the equation, but at the same time you are also fundamentally looking at good, bad, and they are fighting against one another. And that's really what War of the Ring gives to you, on top of the idea of some of the very key important locations, of course the important characters, all of that kind of stuff. But again, it was a very difficult decision with so many Lord of the Rings options, but I personally went with War of the Ring as my number 5. At number 4, I've got Fury of Dracula, based of course off of Bram Stoker's classic novel. This is an interesting one because I love that it took the characters from the literature directly and put them into the game. You have the actual locations that are visited throughout the books. Of course, they're just locations in Europe, just cities in Europe. But at the same time, I love that they sort of bring that real tension between the hunters and Dracula as you're going through. You are trying to actively find him. It's unsafe for you to travel at night. It's super dangerous for you to do that. And then when you're hot on his tail, hopefully you'll be able to track him and get him and stake him before he's able to get back to his hideout. On top of that, Dracula is constantly putting his influence all throughout Europe, and it's making the world a darker, meaner, crueler place. It really does a lot to encapsulate the ideas of what's going on within the literature, on top of being a wonderfully well-designed game overall. Fury of Dracula, my number 4. At number 3, I've got Arkham Horror. This is a game I've talked about a lot in this context, including doing an entire video about Cthulhu mythos or mythos themed games, however you want to pronounce it, where essentially I said Arkham Horror is my personal favorite in that. I find that this captures the theme of H.P. Lovecraft's books the best because you have that utter terror of the common folk trying to fight against an enemy that you can't see and is effectively all-powerful and can literally throw you out of space and time altogether, who is coming to eat and destroy the world and everything on it and in it, and you are doing your best to combat it. And it's absolutely amazing. This has named characters from the books, named locations, specific events that actually occurred within the mythos stories that H.P. Lovecraft wrote. It's incredibly well done. It's a lot of fun, but it is a beastly game to play. However, it's still my number 3. At number 2, I've got Game of Thrones, the board game. Specifically, I really appreciate this with the Mother of Dragons expansion, because how can you have Game of Thrones with no Targaryens, no Essos, no House Aaron? Just drives me insane. But that said, I think that this game does a wonderfully good job at maintaining the political intrigue and sort of backstabby type of deals and all of that kind of things that you see throughout the books, the TV show, and everything else. You see, of course, named characters that have particular abilities during combat. You are constantly fighting for power in a literal sliding scale in terms of how much influence you have. It is absolutely incredibly well well done, and I truly, truly love it. Between the character interaction, backstabbing intrigue, all the way to control of the actual throne, as well as Valyrian steel and the messenger crows, the wildling attacks, everything about it is truly incredible. I really love it. Game of Thrones, my number 2. And number 1, I've got Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, based of course off of the same character from Arthur Conan Doyle and all of his stories. This game is truly incredible. I absolutely love how the game is presented. I love that the idea is you are diving into a mystery. It is something that feels so Holmesian. You are in Victorian London. You are trying to figure out who was murdered, why were they murdered. You're trying to figure out what are the red herrings, where are they at, why are they here, all of this kind of thing. On top of that, you're scouring over various evidence, you're trying to find particular locations of importance, all of this kind of stuff, and all of it with deductive reasoning that would make Sherlock Holmes himself proud. I truly adore it. It's absolutely amazing. There's a lot of scenarios available because there's this as well as a few other versions that have additional things that you can go through. But overall, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, as well as Thames Murders and all of those kinds of things, are my number 1. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 10 favorite literature-themed board games. This is something that I'm really excited about because, like I said at the beginning, literature is ripe with a lot of great information, a lot of great material, and great potential mechanics in terms of political intrigue, characters, and just amazing worlds that we can have. That said, again, there is a ton of them already out there, and these are just my personal favorites, so please feel free to share yours. What do you think about the concept in general? What are your personal favorites? Share it all in the comments. In addition, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my social media pages where you can interact with myself and my channel in a bunch of cool ways. But with that, thank you very much again for watching. Hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.